It's a cold, late winter's morning when 9-year-old Marise Chivarella grabs her gloves and leaves for school.
It was a normal morning. We all got up, got ready for school. The feast day of St. Joseph was March 19th. So on March 18th, Marise was bringing canned goods in celebration of the sisters' feast day.
The route to school was about 5 to 6 blocks.
Marise, however, would never make it to St. Joseph's Academy.
We'd come home for lunchtime. Barry and I came home and Marise didn't.
My father said, go back to school and find her.
Carmen notified her teacher, who in turn notified the priest, who was the head of the Catholic school.
They speak to the instructor that would be her homeroom teacher. That instructor says, I haven't seen Marise either, and I have her marked absent through the morning classes. That's when they realized something went terribly wrong.
And that's when my father started looking. One of the neighborhood women yelled over to my dad and asked who and what he was looking for, and she said, if you're looking for the little girl, they found her.
About 3 miles away from the Chivarella's home, a man makes a grim discovery.
Arthur Robinson and his nephew were driving in what would normally be called the stripping area, which is a coal mine area out in Hazel Township.
And while he is there, he notices something approximately 25 feet down a slope from the top of the garbage dump area.
And as he got closer, he realized that it was a little girl.
He immediately left the refuse pit and called the state police. The priests who were attached to the school that Marise went to, they made their way out to the scene to administer last rites, which was common back in the day.
And one of those priests actually knows the victim and positively identifies her as Marise Ann Chivarella.
She was down an embankment, and her hands were bound, her feet were bound. She appeared to have ligature marks around her neck. Her stockings were pulled down just below thigh level, along with her underwear were pulled down along her legs also. She had a scarf stuffed into her mouth, which they called a babushka at the time. However, her clothing, which consisted of a blue jacket, wasn't dirty. It appeared that she had been placed there at the bottom of the pit. At the time in 1964, DNA evidence didn't exist, so what they were looking for would be any type of blood evidence that may have been left by the perpetrator on the victim. So the coroner did an autopsy, and they determined that Marise was sexually assaulted. She was strangled and beaten. They also made a determination of a bruise on her abdomen, as if somebody had struck her very hard and it caused some damage to her intestines on the inside. They interviewed the father, they interviewed the mother of Marise, they interviewed the brothers and sisters. After interviewing them, they realized the timeline for Marise leaving the residence was shortly after 8 a.m.
So the police were going ahead and contacting all the neighbors and people that lived within, I believe it was about a 5-city block area, to try to establish what route she took to school that day.
Everyone in Hazleton seems to have a theory about the murder.
I remember people wondering, was it one of our neighbors? That's what the scariest part was, not knowing who and what they might do next. I remember the church being packed with people. The viewings, the lines were out the funeral doors home.
We see a headline where it says, "Farewell kiss from mother as coffin closed." That right there really hits home that a mother is giving her 9-year-old child a farewell kiss. Parents aren't supposed to outlive their children.
The biggest question is why? Why would somebody do this terrible thing to Marise?
By the end of 1964, leads in the case have dried up, and the case of the girl who left for school and never came home goes as cold as winter winds in Hazleton. Then, 43 years after the murder, the investigation is reignited with a major breakthrough.
With the advancement of technology In 2007, our department went ahead and yet again sent out Marise Chivarella's clothing. And it was finally in 2007 that they were able to locate seminal fluid on her blouse that she was wearing. From that stain, they were able to obtain a DNA profile for a potential suspect.
Investigators enter the sample into a national database.
In 2007, the suspect profile was checked against CODIS, and there was no match. Since there was no match in CODIS, either the individual had been deceased for quite some time, or they were never mandated to submit to a DNA sample as required by law.
Once again, the investigation grinds to a halt. 3 years later, there's a new investigator and new hope.
I was assigned the case in the fall of 2017 upon the retirement of the then lead investigator, Corporal McAndrew. And when you see the massive size that this case file is, there's over 6,000 pages. Corporal McAndrew had been working potentially on acquiring this new technology where we could take a DNA sample, send it to a company, and they would be able to provide us with a snapshot, if you would, of an individual's ethnicity. The DNA wasn't sent out until May of 2018, and the report that we received back wasn't received until October of 2018.
It was February of 2020, and I was reading up on cold cases in Pennsylvania, and being that Hazleton is only about 80 miles from where I go to school, it was one of the first cases that came up online when I was looking. After reading the Marise Chivarella article, I just could not get this article off my mind. So I immediately said, okay, what if I just send them an email saying, hey, I've read that you were trying this. I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes, but here's who I am, here's what I've been doing. If you think there's a chance I can help out with your case, I would love to do it.
We met with Eric Schubert down at his college campus at a coffee shop, and he came prepared like it was a job interview. Our sample, our DNA profile, had been uploaded by this company to a publicly available genealogical database, and we provided that information to Mr. Schubert, who then started trying to put together family trees.
I basically made a very calculated genealogical decision to focus on one side of the family that I thought could be promising as opposed to the other. And as I did that, what happened was I actually ran into this large family that had Italian lineage.
With this name of Palmeno.
Okay, we have this family, we have all these people. Now it's time to get some DNA samples and see if we're on the right track.
After more than a year of collecting data and narrowing their search, investigators get a break.
We got a break in the case in the form of some publicly uploaded DNA samples.
We had it narrowed down to 2 people.
One brother had died several years ago. The other brother had died back in 1980.
Found that one of the brothers had an extensive criminal history, to include a sexual assault that occurred in 1974. That was similar to the sexual assault and homicide which had occurred in 1964.
The man's name is James Paul Fort.
We were 99% sure that James Fort was going to be our suspect in this homicide.
One hurdle remains for investigators.
Okay, we have enough evidence here to show that it is probably him. However, he's been dead since 1980, and he does not have children.
We met with the district attorney's office. We obtained a search warrant to exhume Mr. Fort's body and prove once and for all that he was the person responsible for Marise's death.
On February 3rd, 2022, nearly 58 years after Marise Chivarella's murder, investigators get the answer they've been searching for.
We received the results from our DNA lab, and James Paul Fort
matched the DNA profile from the semen stain on Marise Chivarella's jacket.
We're always told not to get attached to a case, but you can't help it.
Two 2:15 a.m. in the Buckeye district of Phoenix, Arizona. Neon fractures the night. Dealers crowd darkened doorways, and pimps push their product onto street corners. In the heart of Buckeye sits the Travel Lodge Motel, an easy mark for every punk and grifter who floats by. At 2:40 a.m., two men approach the lodge. The pair is buzzed in and approaches the front desk. From a back room, the lodge's owner, 66-year-old Dale Sechrist, emerges. One of the men lays a .22 revolver across the counter and directs Sechrist to the hotel safe. Sechrist opens it and reaches in for the money, but comes out with a loaded .38. Less than 10 feet apart, Sechrist and the would-be robbers exchange gunfire. A .22 slug finds the lobby's back wall. A second hits Dale Sechrist in the chest. An hour later, Dale Sechrist is dead. 5 a.m., homicide detectives arrive at the Travel Lodge and start to process the scene. The walls are littered with slugs. The floor covered in shell casings and blood. A trail found near the front door tells police Dale Sechrist hit one of the would-be robbers before he died. This smear on a pole outside indicates the bullet wound was probably high up, near the face or neck. In the days before DNA, nothing further can be gleaned from the blood. Detectives then turn their attention to fingerprints. The lobby is full of them, pulled off doorknobs, countertops, and walls. In 1974, the process is done by hand. In 8 hours of work, an examiner can compare a single lift against about 100 print cards. The chances of finding a match, slim and none. In the case of Dale Sechrist, no match is found. Over time, the investigation into his death suffers the same fate. Fewer print cards are examined. Promising leads are run down and out. The case of Dale Sechrist's attempted robbery and murder goes cold. October 1995. The city of Phoenix, as well as its police department, has grown. Inside the homicide squad, however, Ed Reynolds' office is typical, not much larger than a broom closet. From here, he sifts through old crimes, looking for a file that may hold the clue to a killer. 22 years after Dale Sechrist was shot and killed, Ed Reynolds pulls up the Travel Lodge folder. 10 fingerprints lifted from the hotel's lobby 22 years earlier are still unidentified. Of the 10 prints, only one has enough points of identification for a run through APHIS. On October 11th, 1995, Walmsley runs Reynolds' single print through the APHIS system. In a matter of minutes, the Travel Lodge lift is compared against more than 10 million sets of prints stored in the APHIS system. That morning, Ed Reynolds gets a phone call.
Latent print examiner calls me up and says that she's identified the a latent print found on the inside of the door, the exit door that the suspects had to have exited from, to a subject by the name of Joseph Gillum.
Joseph Gillum's prints are in the APHIS system because Gillum himself is in prison, doing time for computer fraud. In 1974, Gillum lived in Phoenix, not far from the Travel Lodge. Reynolds has his first suspect. He starts with Gillum's criminal record.
All I could find is a shoplifting report where Gillum had been arrested, and his brother had been arrested for shoplifting several miles from there around that time.
Shoplifting is a long way from armed robbery, and an even longer walk from murder. Was Joe Gillum just an innocent visitor to the Travel Lodge in 1974, or did the then 16-year-old shoot it out with Dale Sechrist? Reynolds decides to pay Gillum a jailhouse visit. But first he pulls Gillum's personnel jacket Among the items inside, a booking photo.
The first thing I noticed is I pulled his prison photos from when he was first sent to prison, and I noticed he had some unusual scars on his face.
One scar in particular, on Gillum's right cheek. It looks like it could have come from a bullet. Reynolds knows that Seacrest had managed to shoot one of his attackers. From the blood smears left at the scene, Reynolds also knows the wound was probably up high. On July 24th, Ed Reynolds meets with Gillum. As the interview unfolds, Reynolds decides to play a hunch.
I decided to go into this interview and leave him with the feeling that I already knew he committed this crime, that I already knew that one of the scars on his face was a result of this crime.
How about you? Had you ever been injured?
Yeah,
How?
I got shot.
And who shot you?
I don't know the person that shot me.
Tell me about that.
I kind of figured that's what this was about.
Reynolds' bluff works, and Gillum starts to talk.
I ride with this guy. We riding down Van Buren. We supposedly looking for girls. We pull into a motel. He turns to me and say, "Hey, you want to get a room?" I said, "Yeah." But still in my mind, I still don't know what's going on. Because we ain't picked up and talked to no girl or nothing. Next thing I know, shooting breaks out. Instead of you shooting the guy that's got the gun, you shoot me. That's how I got this. I hit the floor. Next thing I know, there's no more shooting. I get up, run out the door.
Gillum claims he never knew anyone died during the Travelodge shootout. He also contends he was not the shooter.
I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
If you're telling me the truth, I know that you know the name of the guy that you were with.
Johnny.
Johnny what?
Riley.
Johnny Raleigh? Riley? John Riley.
Reynolds leaves with the name he needs. The man Reynolds believes may have fired the gun that killed Dale Seacrest. Now he needs to find Johnny Riley. Ed Reynolds starts his search for Johnny Riley in the criminal records archives of the Phoenix Police Department. There he finds Riley's misspent youth, a string of convictions for strong-arm theft and robbery. Of particular note, an arrest very close in time to the Travelodge shootout. Ed Reynolds next decides to pay a visit to Riley's old neighborhood.
I found his friends and the people that he associated with, and they all knew Johnny Riley as being the tough one in this group, the one that would be the guy most likely to commit an armed robbery.
Reynolds believes he may have identified his shooter. The problem is finding him. According to his friends, Riley left Phoenix in the late 1970s. At the same time, his string of arrests abruptly stopped. Ed Reynolds must now shift gears from a paper chase to a hunt through cyberspace. On the World Wide Web, there is a site called Faces of the Nation, a tracking system designed to access public records and find individuals. Reynolds uses the system to track Johnny Riley. In short order, Faces of the Nation finds Reynolds' man.
What I found was a church in Tacoma, Washington, where Johnny Riley was the pastor. A very motivating sermon that he would preach to his congregation was about the day that when he was living in sin, he and his friend Joe had done a robbery, and there was shooting involved and bullets were flying everywhere, and that God or an angel reached down and swatted the bullets away and protected him. And he used that as his profession of faith and his witness to his congregation that no matter how bad you are, that you can turn your life around.
On November 24th, 1997, Ed Reynolds sits down with Johnny Riley.
And then there's a story that some of your, I guess you call them parishioners, would tell about your testimony or your witness to your congregation about a robbery that you and this young man did back in Phoenix when you were in trouble and before you had Jesus.
Riley admits that he and Joe Gillum attempted to rob the Travelodge. Then comes the key question.
Who had the gun?
I think he handed me the gun. He had the gun, he gave me the gun. I think I had the gun.
What kind of gun did you have?
I think we had a 22.
Johnny Riley has no idea that this is a murder investigation. When he ran from that crime scene 25 years ago, He didn't think he had shot anybody. He didn't think anybody was hit with a bullet, much less went down and died.
The day after this interview, cold case detective Ed Reynolds officially informs Riley of Dale Sechrist's death and arrests him for murder. A murder Riley confessed to without ever realizing he had killed anyone.
Hello, you've reached the Arizona State Prison Complex in Yuma.
Johnny Riley now resides here in Yuma State Prison, where he is serving 10 years for second-degree murder. Joe Gillum received a similar sentence for manslaughter and does his time across state.
I think one of the last things he told me in the last interview I had with him was that if he had known 25 years earlier that he had killed that man, that he would have turned himself in 25 years ago.
It's an exciting day in the Evergreen State for 9-year-old Candy Rogers and all the kids who take part in Campfire Girls.
We had a campfire mint sale every year. It was a big thing. That's what kept Campfire going.
March 6, 1959 for Candy Rogers started with school as usual, but she also had the excitement of selling campfire mints that afternoon. At the end of the day, she picked up 7 boxes of mints, quite an armload with her school books and the mints. She was a little thing. Candy weighed only 60 pounds, was 4'4". She lived with her mother, Elaine.
She was very shy and an only child.
At 4 p.m., Candy set out in her own neighborhood to sell mints. She visited anywhere from 10 to 15 different homes. Darkness set in at about 5:45 in Spokane on March 6.
When she did not return and it got dark, her grandparents started looking for her.
Family members, neighbors, and police quickly got involved.
That night, volunteers find boxes of campfire mints scattered along the road by the Spokane River, which police believe belong to Candy.
One of the boxes of mints they found on the night of the initial search did produce a latent fingerprint. It was sent to the FBI, and it was never identified.
We were all praying and hoping that they would find Candy. In my mind, she was gonna be fine, absolutely fine.
The search for Candy continues around the clock. Finally, 2 weeks after she vanished, 2 airmen who had gone hunting find a pair of girls' shoes in the woods.
The police met up with those airmen, and they traveled to that site that night, and the shoes were found. Darkness had set in, but preparations were made to begin a search of that area for Candy that morning.
Police search the woods, looking for anything that will lead them to Candy Rogers.
50, 60 yards in from the road, my partner and I came to a pile of clippings from trees and dead boughs. As we moved around it, my partner all of a sudden said, "There she is." All we saw was a little kneecap of a child's sticking out of the brush pile.
The police officers stand guard over what could be Candy's remains until detectives arrive.
The condition she was found in, it would have affected the investigators. They shifted into high gear trying to find her to kill her.
Cause of death was determined to be strangulation. There were obvious signs of sexual assault.
They only had just so much that they could go on, and that's one of the frustrations that they obviously faced. Then the tips just started trailing off. There just wasn't a whole lot coming in. In the mid-60s, investigators did have to stop because they were at a dead end.
The case of the murdered Campfire Girl goes colder than the Spokane River in winter. For decades after the case goes cold, Candy's case gets new life and a new investigator who takes a fresh look at all the old evidence.
She is the first to apply modern DNA to the investigation, determining, does DNA even exist on any of our evidence?
The detective found that we had Candy's underwear in a mason jar.
Being in a glass mason jar, this really preserved that DNA evidence.
The Washington State Patrol Crime Lab found semen on her underwear and were able to get a strong DNA profile. That was huge as well.
The DNA profile was then uploaded to the CODIS database, and there were never any hits obtained.
Almost 20 more years pass before another ray of hope appears for detectives when a new technology called genetic genealogy emerges.
Genetic genealogy is the use of ancestry databases to build a family tree around the DNA obtained from the crime scene from the perpetrator who left behind their DNA.
Since the crime lab does not do genetic genealogy, Brittany Wright needs to provide a whole new DNA sample to a private genealogy lab to do advanced testing.
The sample was sent off to Othram in March of 2021. If this didn't work, this case was going to be done.
It's Labor Day weekend, and my phone starts coming to life. I know, this is Othram calling about Candy Rogers. They gave me 3 names over the phone. They were John Hoff, Terry Hoff, and James Hoff, all brothers who lived in Spokane and were now deceased. Genealogy can't differentiate between brothers. They all appear the same in a family tree. My next steps are to narrow it down to the one, and I want to do that through DNA. They're all 3 dead. John Ray Hoff appears to be the only one with any children. I called the youngest daughter first. I said I was a cold case investigator and looking for her help.
So we went down to the detective building and met him.
I compared Kathy's DNA profile to the perpetrator's DNA profile. Whoever left behind their DNA sample on Candy Rogers' underwear was also the father of Kathy.
John Ray Hoff had a petty juvenile record. He enlisted early in the U.S. Army at the age of 17. He was stationed in Spokane at the time of Candy Rogers' homicide. John Ray Hoff was discharged from the Army dishonorably and bounced from odd job to odd job. He committed suicide in 1970.
All signs point to John Ray Hoff. But there is a huge question hanging over the case. And the question is, who is Kathy's biological father?
Kathy's mother had an affair while her husband was in Korea.
The affair added uncertainty to the question of whether or not John Hoff was truly her biological father.
The only way to resolve this is to exhume John Ray Hoff.
They got to work digging the grave and opening the cement vault, but there was absolutely no usable DNA. I decided to give one more shot and try and get DNA from his teeth. I actually had DNA in one of those teeth. I was very, very excited. I ran that sample overnight. When I got to work, I ran to my computer and I opened up the software that analyzes the DNA profiles.
It's October 1st of 2021. Brittany calls and says, that's it, it's him. Finally, the clock stops. 62 years, 8 months, and I forget, 13 days. That clock finally stopped.
I wanted people to know what my dad did. There's no making him pay for it. There's no punishment. But I'm going to expose him.
I imagine Candy as a bright, bubbly, carefree kid who was living in a world without fear and only hope, where simple things made you happy and there really was nothing to worry about.
What would she have been? What could she have done? She might have been a doctor. She could have been a great scientist. We'll never know that.
Since the discovery of Candy's killer after 62 years, Joanne Poss and Kathy Baird have met and made a real connection.
I haven't had anybody act like they know me. Like we'll never be able to get away from it. But me and Joanne are able to build a relationship out of this.
We need to take care of each other. Good overcomes evil.
It's the Wednesday before Memorial Day weekend, and Freddie Farah, owner of the Grand Park Food Market, is busy ringing up his regular customers.
A young man entered the store. That young man asked for a price check, and as Mr. Farah was giving that response, the young man pulled out a firearm.
The suspect pointed it at Mr. Farah. Mr. Farah stepped to his right, kind of in front of the register. The suspect made a couple statements, like, give it up, or give me the money.
Mr. Farah instinctively reached up to move the firearm out of his face, and as he did, the young man shot one time and hit Mr. Farah.
One bullet struck Mr. Farah in the head just above the right eye.
The man bolts out of Grand Park Food Market, empty-handed. 34-year-old Freddie Farah clings to life as an ambulance rushes him to nearby Methodist Hospital.
I fell to the ground, and they told me that he had been shot in the head. His heart was still beating, but they think he was brain dead. We stayed there until they finally pronounced him dead. He bought 2 grocery stores of his own. The very first one was a very small grocery store. And the second one was when his cousin died, who had a much larger grocery store. His uncle told him, why don't you come take over this grocery store?
In 1972, Freddie buys the Grand Park Food Market.
Shortly after he bought that store, he told me, I don't think I'm going to stay in this store very long. And I was wondering why he said that. There were long hours. Maybe he wanted to spend more time with the children. He was a very family-oriented man, but he never answered me why he didn't want to stay in that store for very long.
Jacksonville police arrive on scene at the Grand Park Food Market.
When the detectives entered the store, they noticed 3 items: a cake mix box, a frosting can, and a soda can on the counter near the register. But nothing was taken. Money wasn't taken.
Unsure who left these items on the counter and why, crime scene technicians bagged them as potential evidence. Desperate for leads, detectives double down on their canvass of the neighborhood around the Grand Park Food Market. Through word on the street, detectives learned there may have been a customer in the store at the time of the shooting.
Annette Bryant was 14 years old at the time. She lived in the neighborhood. She had gone up to the store to buy some items for her mother.
Detectives find Annette at her home.
Miss Bryant saw the tall, thin black male with a red shirt outside the store. And when she was inside the store, that same young man entered the store, putting the cake mix, cake frosting, and the soda can on the counter. She was able to tell the police that the young man pulled out a firearm and said something along the lines of, "This is a robbery," or "This is a stick-up." She said that Mr. Farah reached forward to move the gun, potentially protecting her, as the gun was pointing also in her direction. And when he did, the gun fired as the shooter shot the firearm.
Annette is the only eyewitness who sees the shooting. And she even sees the suspect place the cake mix, the frosting can, and the soda can on the counter prior to the shooting.
In the evidence technicians' attempt to lift prints off of the items left behind, they were able to achieve positive prints. They did do a search, and that search was only done on a local level.
This is before you're able to check stuff nationally. And if the suspect hadn't had an arrest record prior to the homicide occurring, he would have never been identified.
The case of the young father murdered in his own market goes ice cold.
Technology has grown immensely over the years, and we've got great equipment to identify suspects. When I looked at the Freddie Farah case, we just had fingerprints, and so we ran the fingerprints again. Ended up getting a report that the latent print from the frosting can and the cake mix box came back to a Johnny Miller.
I was exhilarated. It was amazing to me that here we are 43 years later and we're getting ready to possibly solve a cold case.
I run Johnny Miller in our local databases. Back in 1974, he was a young male, late teens. All right, we got something. But then you also have to think, this could just be anybody who went over and picked up a can and put it back down on the counter prior to the suspect coming in. Our last known address for Johnny Miller is in New Orleans. Then that was a 5-year-old address. What if we went out there and he's not there? He's just this needle in a haystack. But there's only one way. Sergeant Jansen said, you gotta go. We ended up going into one of the precincts in the French Quarter and met up with a uniform officer. Once we showed him the picture, he ended up recognizing Johnny Miller. And he said, I'll look around for him.
Less than an hour later, Detective Radigan gets a phone call. The officer has found Johnny Miller.
He spoke with Mr. Miller just briefly. I told him I was a detective from Jacksonville and I was working an investigation. Johnny agreed to come speak with us.
I never been to this store.
Never been to that store?
I can remember. Put that, I said, don't put nothing on me. I never been to that store.
Okay. When I got your fingerprints and you tell me that you were never there, then your denials are just as good as a confession.
Johnny Miller is arrested in New Orleans. The state approaches the Farah family with an idea, a plea deal with Johnny Miller. In exchange for time served, Miller would plead guilty to Freddie's murder and meet with the Farah family to answer their questions.
I did want to see him face to face, and I knew Bobby was going to ask questions, and I did want to hear his answers.
Johnny Miller takes the plea deal and agrees to meet with the Farah family in a restorative justice session.
The main goal of restorative justice is to bring the offender and victim or victim's family together so that the offender is held to account by explaining and apologizing for what he or she has done.
I asked him, was he angry with my dad? Did my dad upset him? He said that he found the gun and he was going to take it into my dad's store to ask my dad what he should do with it. And he said something overcame him when he got into the store and he pulled the gun out of his tool bag. And he said that my dad saw the gun and lunged at the gun to protect the little girl. And when he did, the gun went off. He said he just turned around and ran out of the store.
Mr. Miller kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And then I just told him, we forgive you.
Mrs. Farrow just blew me away. Such a strong woman and such a forgiving woman. I was crying. I believe the state attorney was in there crying. We were just so humbled by her.
Freddie was the love of my life. I only lived with him, unfortunately, a very short time. So I don't know what would have happened in our later years.
Two miles away from the surf and sand of Huntington Beach, three boys make a grim discovery.
It was a Thursday afternoon. Officer Tom Quick responded from the Huntington Beach Police Department regarding a woman that was found in a plowed farm field near Newland and Yorktown. The fire department responded and found a obviously deceased female face down in a ditch in that field. She was dressed as if she was going out. She had a leather jacket, black loafer shoes, purple capri pants that were pulled up but not secure. She had a flowered blouse that had been torn open.
All the clothing, there were no tags. There was no identifying anything. So the prime question is, who is she?
Anita was born on March 9th, 1942, in Augusta, Maine. She had 6 brothers and sisters. She was pretty rambunctious. Anita was a really good aunt. She was really nice to us and would play games with us.
Everybody enjoyed being around her, had fun with her.
Anita P2 is 26 in 1968, with a fun-loving and rebellious spirit. At one of her jobs, Anita makes some new friends with exciting plans to get out of their small town and head for California.
The investigators realize now that they're working with Jane Doe, a victim that is unidentified.
Investigators methodically search the area where the victim was found.
There was a lot of stuff collected. And one of those items was a cigarette butt that was very close to where it appeared the body dump had taken place.
The autopsy confirms that the victim had been viciously assaulted and raped.
She said she was doing well in California. She really liked the weather, and that she had taken a trip to Hollywood to see the stars' homes. And this was the only letter that we ever got from her. We started getting worried about Anita when we didn't receive any other letters after that. The address on the envelope was Whittier. So my uncle decided to contact the police and have them do a check on her at that address. When police got to the house was abandoned. The house looked like it was a commune that a lot of people lived in because they left a lot of stuff in the house, but nobody's there. And that's all we knew.
Unaware of Anita's family's search, police in California take an unusual step in hopes of identifying this Jane Doe.
They had an open morgue showing where anybody could come down there and look at her body.
And so she was kept for an unusually long time at the coroner's office with the body under refrigeration. No one was able to identify the body.
After 15 months, investigators run out of hope. The unnamed murder victim is unceremoniously buried, and the case goes as cold as the winter winds of Maine. Across the country in California, a new detective reopens the Jane Doe investigation.
I dug the case file out in late 2000 and began reviewing it. There wasn't a lot to go on at the time because there were no eyewitnesses to this. I was apprehensive and even somewhat worried that it would never get solved. This was the only cold case I worked where we didn't know who the victim was. Going through the evidence, we found the cigarette butt as well as her clothing. I asked the technician to see if there could be some DNA extracted to put into CODIS, which is a combined DNA index system. He was able to locate both male DNA from the cigarette butt and Jane Doe's DNA from her article of clothing. Both of those were put into the system, hoping to get a match. After a couple of days, I heard from the technician that there was no match.
By 2011, a new DNA technique emerges that gives investigators hope.
Familial searching and genetic genealogy are avenues for DNA investigation. Genetic genealogy is the use of DNA testing to assist in identifying blood relatives.
They begin by looking for Jane Doe's relatives.
You're looking for a first-degree relative, a father, a brother, or a son, and that's the way familial works.
So we found the common thread of a marriage in the family that produced 4 sons. They're all second cousins to the relative we found in the database. They're the right generation, and they're about the right age. This is it. We found them. The killer is one of these 4 brothers.
The test results show that the killer is almost certainly Larry, Danny, Michael, or Johnny Crisco. Further investigation places Johnny Crisco in the vicinity of the crime back in 1968.
And there was a history of him working at bars as bouncers. So we thought maybe he had worked at that bar as a bouncer and she went in to have a good time.
Having identified the killer, the team turns back to unraveling the mystery of Jane Doe.
We were always told that with all the testing over time, all the blood off of her blouse was consumed and it wasn't an option for DNA. But we want to know for sure.
Fortunately, the sample has been refrigerated for 33 years, and investigators submit the decades-old blouse for DNA testing. They find the names of a handful of individuals who could be related to Jane Doe. Back in Maine, Anita's sister Ann gets a phone call from Detective Deerking.
It would have been 9:30 on the East Coast. We made a round of calls and talked with Ann. She immediately told us that Anita was missing from 1968. And at that moment, it was like, oh my gosh, this looks like it's the real deal. Our victim was Anita. It was a surreal, exciting moment for everybody connected to the case.
52 years after the body of Jane Doe was found in Huntington Beach, Anita's family finally holds a memorial service in her honor.
I elected to travel with her remains to the memorial service, and it was extremely special to not only me, but to the family, and to see the closure and to meet these people that were 3,000 miles away.
I just want everybody to remember her as this fun-loving woman. She didn't have the chance to really live her life because it was taken from her. But she was finally found and brought back to us. And that's all we really wanted. She's here.
It was a typical Michigan winter day. You know, ground was covered with snow. We had just started an afternoon shift about 3 p.m. and we were just a couple of minutes in when we got the call from Central Dispatch.
Hi, this is a concerned citizen. There's a man laying down here in this ditch on 60th Street and 16th. It looks like he got hit.
When we arrived, we could see the body in the ditch. The victim was a white male, thin guy. That he had been stabbed in the skull, in the body multiple times.
During the course of the investigation with all the police vehicles parked, one of the neighbors noticed this commotion and he identified his son as the person in the ditch. And he was identified as Christopher Green.
This case was unusual in this area in that we didn't have a lot of murders. And even when we did, usually there was some other criminal activity that this was tied to.
That's what was really strange about the crime, that Christopher was the homicide victim. He was a quiet kid, and his family was a quiet family, good people.
At the crime scene, police find Christopher's glasses in the roadway, a few feet away from his body.
It became clear that this began on the roadway and then continued to where the body was found in the ditch.
The footwear belonged to a larger person. It appeared to be a tennis shoe of some sort. They were able to follow the footwear impressions for quite a distance, but eventually, due to the vehicle traffic, tracks were lost.
In the brush, near where the footprints disappear, police recover what appears to be the murder weapon.
There was a knife, right? The blade is still at the scene, but the handle's gone. We could see the blood on the knife. It's critical to collect all of the blood that you see. You don't know if this is victims, suspects.
Meanwhile, back at Christopher's home, his family provides detectives with a possible lead.
So Christopher, in the summer of 2002, he was working at a blueberry farm and had met Lisa Cousins. She lived down the street from us. They started dating. I don't know that it was anything serious, but for whatever reason, Lisa's dad, Floyd, did not like Christopher.
Investigators take a look at his shoes. None of the shoes that he owned matched the tread marks that were found at the scene of Christopher Green's murder.
Floyd Cousins will remain on the investigators' radar. In the meantime, his daughter Lisa mentions something that sparks their interest.
Lisa detailed an incident that had happened relatively close in time to the murder, where there was an argument with Christopher and a person named Ray Berry. This was about 2 weeks before this murder occurred. The argument started when Christopher said something that Lisa took issue with. And Ray, who had had a romantic interest in Lisa Cousins, seeing himself as the knight in shining armor, sort of stepped in. At that point, law enforcement, once they identified that Ray Berry was a person of interest, did some digging into his background. It was discovered that Ray Berry already had an active warrant out for his arrest for destruction of property.
Detectives put the word out on the street.
Ray Berry was found to be riding around by troopers on a traffic stop.
They asked him about his shoes to potentially compare to the prints found at the crime scene. Ray indicated that the shoes he was wearing were the only shoes that he owned. And they didn't match up to any impressions that were found at the crime scene. Another thing about the interview with Ray Berry is that the alibi he gave was unverifiable. He said that he was at home, but no one was around. Certainly, this evidence is starting to point more strongly towards Ray Berry. However, there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime scene.
Police arrest Berry for the property destruction charges. And in the days that follow, results from the blood on the murder weapon come in.
As it turned out, all of it was the victims. None of it was the suspects.
The autopsy report is also released.
It was determined that Christopher Green actually died of blunt force trauma. Eventually, the knife broke, so it was believed the suspect found a nearby tree limb and used that to brutally beat the victim to death.
The problem was still that even though there were two good suspects in Floyd Cousins and Ray Berry, police had not found enough concrete evidence at that point to seek charges for the murder of Christopher Green.
A year after Christopher Green's murder, the case of the body in a snowbank starts to chill in the icy winds off Lake Michigan, and the case goes cold.
When a Michigan State Police cold case team got involved later on in this investigation, they're now looking for technology, and that was not available in 2002. Also, they're looking for people who maybe follow-up interviews.
Detectives noticed something odd in Ray Berry's files.
Reports indicated that Ray received a new pair of New Balance tennis shoes from his father a few days prior to the homicide.
It was later learned through a family member of Ray's that the day of the murder, Ray had lost the shoes. It was important to compare the tread mark patterns found at the scene with New Balance shoes.
The footwear was identified as being a New Balance shoe.
It was a vital piece of evidence that the shoe marks found at the scene were linked to different tread patterns for New Balance shoes. And then on the other end of this, Ray Berry owns a pair of New Balance shoes. Is it a complete smoking gun? No. Investigators were still looking for something to really solidify that he was their suspect.
I was contacted by a subject about the Chris Green homicide. He said he had information that he knew would solve this case.
The informant's name is Claude Taylor. He is Ray Berry's half-brother.
Claude Taylor had gotten into some trouble for some breaking and entering cases, and he was looking to get some leniency on the case in exchange for his testimony. He told us how Ray Berry showed up that evening of the homicide and was acting real nervous.
Claude said that he had been watching the news and that there was a body discovered in Bangor. Ray, when he came over, indicated that the victim was Christopher Green, and then Ray went one step further and advised that he had been involved in the murder.
Detective Conklin tells Ray's half-brother that he'll agree to a plea deal on one condition.
I then discussed the ability to put a wire on the witness. Claude came up with the idea to fabricate a story that somebody was talking on the street about Ray Berry and Chris.
So I asked him, I said, so what's his other room? He said, nah, that's the brutal murder and that thing that happened in... Now, I don't want to talk about no brutal, you know what I'm saying? It was brutal. Why was it brutal? What happened? No question. Please don't kill me. Don't kill me.
I remember looking at my partner and saying, did he say what I think he said? We knew we had it. We got the admission that we were looking for.
Following the wiretap operation, Ray Berry is charged with first-degree murder. He pleads not guilty, and the case goes to trial.
The jury found Ray Berry guilty of premeditated first-degree murder.
The judge gave him life without the possibility of parole. I definitely sit there and reflect quite often about what would life be like if Christopher was here.
I would say to the family, I wish we could have done it sooner, and thank you for being patient with us.
The world looks a little brighter for 23-year-old Wendy Camp, since she's getting to see her 4-year-old son for the first time in months. She's been locked in a custody battle with her ex-husband, Chad No.
Chad made arrangements for Beverly No, Chad's mother, to drive to Oklahoma City, pick Wendy up, and bring her to Shamrock, Oklahoma, where Chad was living at the time, to visit with Jonathan, their 4-year-old son.
Wendy was super excited to go, and her daughter, she's 6 years old, asked to go, and she was permitted to go. Wendy's current husband did not feel comfortable with Wendy going alone, so he had asked his sister, Lisa, to go with them. Wendy reluctantly agreed. You know, she really wanted to just go by herself with Cynthia, her daughter.
They got to Shamrock at about 1:40 p.m. on that date. The first thing they did was stop at a convenience store there so that Wendy could call her husband, Leon, let him know that they'd made it there. From there, Beverly took them to Chad's house. By all accounts, the visitation went well. Beverly showed back up at the house at around 4:30 to pick Wendy and Cynthia and Lisa up to take them home. They went to the same convenience store, and again, Wendy called Leon to say, we're headed back home. And that call was about 4:40, 4:45 p.m.
Leon was very, very concerned when they had not made it home by 8 o'clock.
Leon fears something is wrong. And when he talks to Beverly, Wendy's former mother-in-law, that fear deepens. Beverly, who'd driven them to the visit, dropped them off at a shopping mall 45 minutes outside Oklahoma City, instead of driving them back home. The family waits by the phone, fearing the worst, as the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the OSBI, starts searching for Wendy, little Cynthia, and Lisa.
All of the people who had been working at the store on that date were interviewed. People in businesses in the area, everybody was talked to, and nobody reported seeing anybody like that. Beverly said that when she picked the girls up, her mother, Ida Pruitt, was also with her. They hadn't got a block, and Wendy was just complaining about everything. So Ida told Beverly, why don't you just take me home? Beverly dropped Ida off and then continued on to Chandler, Oklahoma.
When she reaches the Walmart in Chandler, she said she had become very tired of listening to them. So she just stopped and dropped them off. Beverly was very cooperative with us, answering all the questions. Everything she was telling me was very feasible.
Agents interview Wendy's husband, Leon, and clear him. That's not the case with Chad No, Wendy's ex. Red flags pop up right away. And they're connected to Wendy's illness.
When Jonathan, my grandson, was 3 weeks old, that's when she developed the multiple sclerosis. Wendy could not walk or anything.
When Wendy was in the coma, we found out that Chad had filed for a divorce and for custody of Jonathan.
Chad No was interviewed numerous times. Chad's story Matches up with Leon's story and with a lot of what Beverly said. Chad was never ruled completely out, but Chad No did not become the focus of this investigation.
All the interviews and searches lead nowhere. A year and a half after the disappearance, the TV show Unsolved Mysteries features the case.
They came out and did the interview, and we felt that that could help solve the case.
Something about the program stands out to Wendy's sister. In an interview, Ida Pruitt, Beverly No's mother, strongly denies she or Chad No had anything to do with the disappearance.
Why would Ida get so upset and claim on the Unsolved Mysteries segment that my sister was griping and a bitching about the past? Her remarks do not make sense. I knew that the family was involved.
Suspicions remain, but leads dry up, and the case of Cynthia, Wendy, and Lisa goes colder than a winter freeze in Oklahoma. The case languishes for years, but a suspicious fire might revive it. Police charge Beverly No and Ida Pruitt with arson.
Beverly and Ida set Beverly's house on fire, and they were arrested.
They did it for insurance money. It just shows the corruption in their soul.
Beverly and Ida do 6 months and are released. Then, 4 years later, Ida Pruitt dies. It takes 2 years when an unnamed relative calls in with a lead.
This person's story was that the bodies were buried under a cement slab at a home where Grover Pruitt used to live. Grover Pruitt is Ida Pruitt's son and Beverly No's brother. The tip was vetted out, but no bodies were found. Still, this did jumpstart the investigation again on Grover Pruitt.
We interviewed Grover at his house.
Grover started telling him about this other property he owned back then.
Grover had sold 5 of those acres to his mother, Ida. She had asked him to dig her a hole to put a septic tank in. Shortly after that, Wendy, Lisa, and Cynthia went missing.
Excavation on the hole begins, and it's a slow and careful process.
As we got further down, we began to find layers of trash.
And then we saw a little sneaker. There were what appeared to be 2 adult skeleton remains and then a smaller child skeleton remains.
Investigators have finally found the bodies of Wendy, Cynthia, and Lisa.
An autopsy was performed. Wendy Camp had sustained gunshot wounds and sharp force trauma, likely a knife. Lisa Kreger had multiple gunshot wounds to the torso, and Cynthia by homicide by undetermined means.
The OSBI special agents turned to the person who helped them find the bodies, Beverly No's brother, Grover Pruitt.
We asked him if he would wear a wire and go talk to his sister about Wendy, Lisa, and Cynthia, and Grover agreed reluctantly. Grover told Beverly that OSBI wanted his 357, and Beverly said, "I don't know why they do that. We threw all the guns in the hole."
With the discovery of the bodies and everything that we learned with Beverly's statement on the recording about guns, we decided it was time to arrest Beverly. Beverly was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, but she never admitted to any of this. It could have been Beverly or Ida, either one, but Ida had died. So Beverly ultimately pled guilty to 3 counts of accessory to murder because she claimed that Ada had done it. Beverly, no, was given 15 years in prison for this.
Then, less than 5 years later, the family faces one final injustice.
Beverly's back out in society. It's crazy.
I feel that my family members got no justice whatsoever simply because of the fact Beverly is out of jail after 4.5 years. What's the justice? Where was the justice? And to this day, 30 years later, Jonathan is still living with Beverly.
On Saturday, December 6th of 2008, it was a typical cool morning. The Cajun Country Marathon at the time was a half-on, half-off-road marathon that was taking place in Lafayette. A runner was warming up prior to the event and had stepped off of one of the trails to relieve himself. And when doing so, he located a female, obviously deceased, and he notified the local sheriff's deputies that were working the race off duty.
Sergeant Bajar makes his way to the crime scene, just off Lajeunesse Road, an area surrounded by thick southern oak and cypress.
The body of the victim was about 20 yards inside the woods from the roadway. The victim was a white female. She was in her mid-40s. Her arms were above her head, and there was a significant amount of blood in the area. The most obvious injury that we were able to tell was that her neck had been cut. Very deep and possibly multiple times. She was still fully clothed. Her pants were unbuttoned, but it didn't appear that the victim had been sexually assaulted. At the time that this occurred, I was on the force for nearly 8 years, and this was probably one of the bloodiest scenes that I had seen.
Since the body was found with no animal activity or no kind of decomposition, which happens very fast here in South Louisiana, it led us to believe that she had not been there very long.
We were unable to find any identification, any type of purse, any type of personal belongings. There was only one thing that was located in her pocket, and that was a room key to a local hotel.
The key belongs to room 46 at the Regency Inn. As the crow flies, it's located 5 miles from the crime scene.
We were able to locate a female who said that her friend, Bonnie Rupert, had not returned from the evening before. We learned that Bonnie Rupert was in her late 40s. She wasn't a resident of this area. She was from Illinois. With the hotel key and the statement that we obtained from the friend that we interviewed, we were fairly confident that Bonnie was the individual that we found off of Lajeunesse Road.
Fingerprints confirm the victim as 47-year-old Bonnie Faye Rupert. Police discover Bonnie is part of a traveling group. She's been sharing a room with the man she mentioned to her daughter. His name is Lambert Hatfield, and their relationship is rocky.
We had learned that there was a domestic incident that had several months prior out of state, where it was reported that Lambert was intoxicated and had struck Bonnie, which led her to go to a women's shelter and to get a stay-away order against him. Bonnie had checked into the women's shelter and then had checked out, stating that she was traveling to Mississippi to do some work, which obviously wasn't the case because she ended up here in Lafayette with Lambert.
Investigators bring Lambert in for questioning.
Lambert said that the last time he saw Bonnie was the Friday morning prior to her death, and that as he left to go to work, she was still sleeping in the hotel room.
Lambert denies any involvement in Bonnie's murder.
Lambert said that Bonnie would disappear on occasion and that she would perform sex acts as a form of revenue so that she could purchase narcotics. Lambert's clothing was also looked at closely. His shoes were inspected, not only for blood or trace evidence, but for the tread on the soles. And that was compared to any type of tread that we located on the scene, and none of those matched, and no physical evidence of blood was found on his shoes. The amount of cooperation that he extended towards us, the lack of physical injuries, and just the way that he presented himself led us to believe that he wasn't involved in the murder. On December 8th, 2008, an autopsy was conducted on Bonnie at the Lafayette Parish Coroner's Office. The initial thought that Bonnie wasn't sexually assaulted was confirmed. The pathologist discovered that Bonnie was stabbed 11 times on her back and shoulders. She was struck with a blunt object approximately 4 times on her head, and that her throat was slashed 6 times.
Bonnie's battle with her killer may well provide detectives with the evidence to catch him.
During the autopsy, it's standard procedure to get nail scrapings. In the case of Bonnie, there was skin that was located underneath her fingernails.
While documenting the blood stains on Bonnie Rupert's shoes, a 90-degree drop was located near her laces and on the toe of her shoe.
As the family grieves, detectives receive results from the lab.
10 days after submitting the blood swabs and fingernail scrapings from Bonnie to the Acadiana Crime Lab, we received a full DNA profile of a white male. So we were fairly confident that this was the blood and DNA profile of our suspect.
The sample was entered into CODIS, but the national database where the DNA is stored, you have to commit a felony or a violent crime. It did not match to anybody in the database at the time.
The lead investigator in Bonnie's case worked diligently for months, exhausted all leads, exhausted all tips, and ultimately she decided to suspend the case.
After a year, the case of the murdered grandmother grows as cold as the dark December waters of the bayou. Though Bonnie's case sits on the shelf, the crime lab continues to run DNA samples through CODIS, looking for a match to their suspect. Then, something catches a specialist's eye.
One of the lab technicians recognized a familial trait on the Y chromosome. That familial trait ran in the Hebert family. So if you were a male with the last name Hebert, or your father had the last name Hebert, you were likely to carry this trait. So while there was still no hit in the database, you now had a last name.
By 2013, I had been transferred to our homicide violent crimes section. And upon my arrival in that section, I requested that I be assigned Bonnie's case.
For 4 years, Sergeant Bajar collects voluntary DNA samples from Hebert family members and keeps plugging them into the system without a hit. Until a surprise phone call turns this stone-cold investigation red hot.
So in March of 2018, 10 years after Bonnie's murder took place, I was building a shed in the back of my house, and I received a phone call from the crime lab. And the technician who I'd worked with for years was extremely excited on the other side of the phone, saying, "We got him, we got him." And when she finally calmed down, she said that she had a match to the suspect DNA in Bonnie's case, and that he had been arrested on a drug charge and booked into the Lafayette Parish Correctional Center, where they obtained a swab from him during the booking process. And in fact, that it was an Hebert, and it was an individual by the name of Millard Hebert.
What is this about? This is about a case that happened in 2008. Your blood and your skin was on her body, okay?
Within 30 seconds, Millard just started talking and without even being asked a question.
I picked her up, I believe, on Cameron Street. Okay, yeah, that I remember. It was on meth. I picked her up high and we rode around. Pulled off on the side there and got out the truck in the back and started fighting, and I strangled her. I freaked out. I just couldn't stop. Was there an altercation? I mean, was there an argument? Was that? Yeah, money for sex. That's what it was about.
Millard Hebert pleads guilty to manslaughter and is sentenced to 20 years in prison.
The fact that Millard openly came out and confessed made it seem like this had been a burden that had been bearing down on him for 10 years. He knew how brutal it was. He was disgusted by it. I believe Millard was truly remorseful in what he had done.
Two locals head down a dirt road to target shoot.
When the target shooters came down, they had smelt smoke and they saw a fire. Well, they noticed what, one of them thought was a mannequin burning. Of course, it was a couple days prior to Halloween, but upon closer inspection, they saw it was a human body. 98% of her body was burned. There was no form of ID or purse on the victim. It was not possible at that time to put an identity to the body.
Etched in the mud by the entrance are a telling set of tire tracks.
With the investigators finding the tire tracks at the gate, it told them that, somebody had tried to exit that way and may not be familiar with this area.
Hoping for more clues, investigators send the body to a forensics lab for an autopsy.
They determined that her age was anywhere from late teens to early 20s. She was 5'4", she was fairly petite.
Believed to be white, possibly Hispanic, with the sandy blonde and reddish hair. That she had bruising around her throat, which could be consistent with strangulation. There was a lack of carbon found in her lungs. It told investigators that she might have been killed somewhere else and brought to this location.
Technicians at the lab check the victim for signs of assault and find a semen sample.
Whoever did this had murdered this individual, went to the trouble of getting gasoline, pouring it on them, lighting a match, and leaving the person there. It's pure evil.
Several names came up of missing people in our area, and the investigators at that time were running these people down, putting eyes on them, being able to rule them out. It's frustrating because you kind of get your hopes up and they're dashed again.
As the police look for new leads, her pale purple sweater inspires a nickname, Lavender Doe.
I think the name Lavender Doe really helped the case stand out from all of the other thousands and thousands of Jane and John Does out there.
As the case gathers dust, police catch a break. The DNA profile from the semen sample collected at the crime scene gets a hit in CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System. The suspect's name is Joseph Wayne Burnett.
Joseph Burnett's occupation was painting oil wells. Burnett was a local sex offender.
Mr. Burnett was living in Upshur County but had not registered there. So law enforcement began at that point to get an arrest warrant for failure to register.
When investigators interviewed Burnett, he tells them that obviously he was with Lavender Doe due to his semen being in her. But the advice that he did not kill her.
Unable to place Burnett at the crime scene, the investigation comes to a halt.
He caught a charge on a fail to comply as a sex offender, and he went away for 10 years.
With every lead a dead end, the case of Lavender Doe goes as cold as a winter wind whipping through the Texas pine woods.
July 19th of 2018, I was contacted by the Longview Police Department in reference to a missing female named Felicia Pearson, and the boyfriend listed was Joseph Wayne Burnett.
Joseph Burnett remains the prime suspect in Lavender Doe's murder. After serving his 10-year sentence, he's been a free man for over a year.
Felicia Pearson's mother reported her missing. She had been told by Joseph Burnett that Felicia had been with Mr. Burnett at a motel in Longview, and he left to go get cigarettes, and when he came back, she was gone.
Police arrest Burnett. He denies having any hand in the death of yet another female companion. But a month later, Burnett changes his tune.
He confesses to killing Felicia, and then he starts speaking with them about burning a female several years ago. I went into the interview room with the Longview detectives. Then we start going into Lavender Doe.
What happened? I went around to the driver's side of my truck. I opened up my toolbox, and I got a rope out. And I grabbed the rope, and I put it around her neck, and I tightened it up.
Burnett is indicted on 2 counts of murder. But the mystery remains. Who is Lavender Doe?
I found a descendant in East Texas.
Her name was Valerie, and she lived only about 30 minutes from where Lavender Doe was found.
I thought to myself, this is it. We solved the case. We found Lavender's mother.
We arrived at Valerie's house. Valerie didn't have any idea of who it could be in her family.
While Valerie might not know Lavender Doe's identity, her DNA could provide the answer.
We found there were over 25 first cousins. As we were building down the family tree, we came upon Robin Novotny. She was the right age to be a parent of Lavender Doe's. She was married to a man named John Dodd. There wasn't a lot of stability in this family, and that sparked our interest.
There was also a younger woman, Dana Dodd. We could see that she was exactly the same age as what we believed Lavender Doe to be. And so we could see that her social security number hadn't been used. We didn't find any Facebook accounts, any Instagram accounts, anything like that. I'm at the coffee shop and pretty much all of the hairs on the back of my neck are just standing up because everything seems to fit.
We found Lavender Doe. We knew we found her. But we needed the DNA to confirm who she was.
I reached out to Lieutenant Hope and gave him all of the information that we had on Dana.
The mother was deceased, and John Dodd was a transient down in Jacksonville, Florida. I spoke to his daughter, Amanda. Amanda was a half-sister to Dana.
When Lieutenant Hope reached out to me, I looked at the picture. I lost it, I did. I started crying. I knew Lavender Doe was Dana.
Investigators still need to confirm that Dana and Lavender are one and the same. They send a DNA test to Amanda.
Lieutenant Hope, he said he got the results back and that Lavender Doe was Dana, that it was my sister. It was just like everything around me just stopped.
Joseph Burnett was charged with 2 homicides, one being Dana Dodd and the other being Felicia Pearson.
At long last, Burnett is hauled into court to face justice.
Joseph Burnett pled not guilty at his arraignment. Even though there was a confession, yes, we did go ahead and start working towards trial.
I wanted to go to court. I wanted to hear his story. I needed to know why he did it. And then he took a plea agreement.
Burnett is sentenced to 50 years in each case. For the families, it is small comfort for their loss.
He's eligible for parole. Once he comes up for that, I plan to be there every step of the way, no matter what. How old I am, I'm gonna be there. I want him to be there forever.
Earl Black returns home from work. Attached to the residence is a family-owned bookstore run by his wife, Sherry.
My wife, Sherry, her car was in her parking place, so I figured she's home. I walked in the shop and hollered, "Sherry," and she didn't appear. There's a room across the back. This door was shut at that time, and I could see blood right above me. So I opened the door, and that's when I found her.
Earl's wife, Sherry, lays prone on the floor. She's not breathing.
She had a pair of scissors sticking out of her belly. I'll never forget it. I mean, how do you forget finding someone you love like that?
I was participating in some tactical training, and my phone rang. I was a lieutenant at the time, which puts me in charge of scene oversight. I went into the bookstore. As you walk in, it's a little bit of a labyrinth, books everywhere. I was directed towards the back, and our murder victim was on the ground and clearly deceased. It was a horrific sight to see. She died violently, and at whose hands, we don't know yet. We knew instantly that this was a homicide.
As crime scene investigators continue processing the scene for evidence, police develop a theory about what happened to Sherry and discover the killer may have left multiple clues behind.
What became evident is clearly there was a fight in this back room. With all of this blood, we have to assume that maybe this murderer's blood is going to be there also. We also were able to locate a partial fingerprint and a palm print. We felt elated because, as we know, just like DNA, fingerprints are specific to one particular individual. Palm prints are the same.
Police collect the fingerprints and blood samples and send them off for analysis. Results from the blood and fingerprints collected from the scene come back, offering new clues about the suspect's identity.
When I found out that we had suspect DNA, we ran it into CODIS, which is a database of criminal offender DNA, and we were informed that there was no match for DNA in that database. As far as the fingerprints and the palm print, we didn't get any hits. I was disappointed.
Leads dry up like the sun-cracked surface of the city's famous Salt Lake. And the case of the bookstore bibliophile goes cold.
The case was transferred over to the Unified Police Department. I had been involved in assisting South Salt Lake in this investigation. Now it's exclusively over at Unified Police Department. I would be assigned as the lead investigator to this case. And I decided I wanted to start fresh. In these types of cases, you really have to try to think of anything and try everything that you possibly can. And on occasion, you might turn over that little stone that all of a sudden produces something.
As Detective Pender searches for strategies to help find Sherry's killer, he comes across a new technology that may hold the key.
I was familiar with genealogy because my mother used to do that to make a little extra money for the family. But I hadn't even heard of anything called investigative genetic genealogy.
We know that there are multiple different databases. People will submit their DNA to determine their genealogy, their familial history. And if we can find through our suspect DNA who this person may be related to, then there's a good chance that we can trace back to our suspect.
I got a call from the genealogist who said, we have a match to an individual who we believe is closely related to your perpetrator. The family were located in Sacramento, California. I knew I needed to get out there and interview him. I actually brought a photograph of Sherry and Earl Black to this home. As we were talking, I asked the adult son if maybe in high school he would have had some type of intimate relationship. He said, I did. And she had indicated to me that I had fathered a child. He received some paperwork signing off custody. That paperwork was actually out of Utah. We were able to actually identify that his name is Adam Antonio Spencer Durborough. He had an extensive record in his juvenile criminal history of violence. As far as his adult criminal history, Adam was charged with shoplifting. That's the only thing he has on his adult criminal history. He would have been 19 years of age when Sherry was murdered. And now he was living in the Orem area, 30 miles south of Salt Lake County. The following day, we drove down to Orem and held surveillance on this residence for a number of days to kind of get his routine down. One of the investigators happened to see a sack from a fast food restaurant inside of his vehicle and ultimately saw Adam dispose of this at his residence in the waste container outside. We took the trash and I informed our state crime lab. They said, great, bring it down to our office. So I went home for the night, went to bed. About 2 or 3 in the morning, I actually got a text and my wife asked, who's texting you at this time in the morning? And I said, it's the lab, it's a match. And I really became emotional at that point. I just laid there and kind of started thinking things through of where we go from here. We followed Adam to Walmart. 6 plainclothes investigators approached Adam. Adam was told he was under arrest. We immediately put him in my patrol vehicle. I'm thinking to myself, we've got to get him to the office. We got to get this interview going. As we're driving, he says, I know what you want to talk about, and if it's what I think you want to talk to me about, then I would want an attorney present. He lawyered up. However, we did have a warrant already prepared for his fingerprints, for his DNA, and for photographs. And I thought, after we take those items, do I just take him to jail and book him in? Or do I put him in the interview room and give it a chance?
Detective Pender rolls the dice. He places Adam Durborough in an interrogation room.
When you get over to the bookstore, is there something that, is there something that sets you off?
I think it was just her being kind, honestly. I saw myself as a terrible, terrible person.
I guess I'm trying to understand.
Why her?
Well, why? Yeah, why her? Why Sherry?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I thought that I was this horrible person growing up. I was young and stupid. I didn't control myself. It wasn't personal. It wasn't planned. It was spontaneous. I wish I could take it back.
I'm not 100% sure why Adam picked Sherry, other than the fact that I do believe Sherry was kind to Adam, and I think Adam had not had that in his life. And I also believe, based on her kindness, For whatever reason, that snapped at him and unfortunately just brutally killed Sherry.
Sherry Black's family gathers at the courthouse for Adam Durborough sentencing. The judge sentences Adam Durborough to life without the possibility of parole. Left Hand Canyon is emerging from its long slumber as spring loosens winter's icy grip. But beneath the canopy of pines, a discovery rocks Boulder County.
The Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, 2 tourists in Left Hand Canyon in Boulder County go for a little hike. They crossed a little stream and began to make their way back into the woods, away from the road. And what they found was the body of a naked woman.
The body was described as a white female, probably about 5 feet tall, and she was a heavy-set woman. We had no identification on the victim or no idea who she was, and her clothing had been taken away. The call to the sheriff's office came in to us at about 2 p.m. The investigators at the scene thought that she had been there no longer than 24 hours at most. There did not appear to be any sort of a sign of a struggle or other forced activity.
It appeared that there was some sort of consensual sexual encounter. It didn't look like the body had been dumped there. It was very clear that someone had tried to obscure the body by covering it with pine branches.
Pretty quickly, they realized that her throat had been slit. They observed the ligature marks around her neck as well.
While detectives try to determine how the victim got there and find some lead to her killer's identity, the medical examiner brings in the body for autopsy.
The forensic pathologist collected a rape kit, or a sexual assault evidence collection kit.
It was way in the early stages of DNA. DNA was not really something that was taken into consideration in 1987.
Fingerprinting the victim, however, gives detectives their first big break, a name from a minor misdemeanor offense.
The fingerprints that were taken from the body were matched through the system to Carol Joyce Murphy, a 27-year-old woman from Longmont.
Back in remote Left Hand Canyon, investigators interview anyone in the surrounding area, looking for leads.
Officers found someone who was camping nearby who recalled seeing 2 people on a motorcycle show up at the campground. They were both wearing helmets, which kept her from being able to give us any sort of description as to who they were.
She was awoken by a motorcycle at what she thought was around 11:30 in the morning. The woman that described the motorcycle being predominantly black, but believed that there was some yellow color tint to it as well, although she couldn't remember exactly, but it was just information that she thought may be helpful to the investigation.
Investigators talked to her co-workers at a company in Longmont where she was a security guard.
That about 8:45 or 9 o'clock in the morning, one of her coworkers observed a gentleman pull up on a motorcycle, which he described as similar to a Honda Goldwing, which was a black motorcycle with very distinctive yellow features. Carol went out, got on that motorcycle, and left.
Coworkers indicated that the person had a helmet on the majority of the time.
That became a critical piece of information in the investigation.
Detectives had focused in on Curtis Murphy as the most recent husband. Curtis was ultimately eliminated as a suspect. Investigators moved on to Kevin Elmar, the ex-husband of Carol Murphy.
Kevin Elmore is also the father of Carol Murphy's 2 children, who are 10 and 8 years old.
I was teamed up with another detective, and the 2 of us were given the assignment to interview Kevin Elmore.
The 2 detectives traveled to Kevin's home in Longmont, just a few minutes from Carol's apartment, and knock on the door.
Kevin said that he had last seen Carol Murphy that morning, earlier before her body was found. She was just getting off work on a night shift, but he drove past her on his way to turn in a job application.
Kevin Elmore owned a yellow and black gold wing motorcycle that fit the description of the motorcycle when Carol Murphy left on it, as well as the motorcycle in the area where Carol's body had been found.
The lieutenant asked us to bring Kevin into the Justice Center in Boulder for a more thorough interview.
You killed Carol? No? You know who did? No?
Kevin Elmore said that he left Carol Murphy on his way to drop off a job application. We went to several grocery stores where we showed his picture to the staff. There's no corroboration that we could find.
It was pretty clear that Kevin Elmore was the prime suspect. I think it became a question of how long was it going to take to find every piece of evidence that we needed in order to hold Kevin Elmore accountable.
The investigation sputters, and the case of the young security guard mom grows colder than the snow-capped peaks of the towering Rockies.
I was assigned the Carol Murphy homicide investigation in December of 2004 as part of a cold caseload. I reassessed what evidence we had, really with an eye for, is there scientific advancement that would give us new leads and new direction?
DNA taken from Carol Murphy's body at the autopsy could now be the key to unlocking this 17-year murder mystery.
The DNA section of the CBI laboratory had 2 DNA profiles that were developed. We were able to attribute one definitively to Willie, who had disclosed he had had sexual relationship with Carol within the days leading up to her death. Who is this other profile?
Detectives have a hunch the other DNA belongs to their prime suspect, Kevin Elmore, Carol's first husband and father of their now grown 2 children.
We needed to get the DNA profile from Kevin Elmore to compare to the forensic samples.
I obtained a court order to collect buccal swabs from Kevin Elmore in August of 2006. A little over 19 years since Carol's murder. I was able to collect multiple buccal swabs from Kevin Elmore. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation had been able to do a definitive match. I believe it was 99.999998% of the population could be excluded, which left Kevin as the only probable contributor in the world.
The arrest warrant was signed January 29th of 2007. Kevin Elmore was arrested that same day.
August of 2009, Kevin Elmore was convicted of first-degree murder after deliberation, and he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
In December of 2013, I received a phone call from the district attorney's office stating that the case had been overturned and that we would have to have another trial.
The Court of Appeals was saying that Mr. Elmore should have had the opportunity to advance certain alternate suspects to the jury that had been precluded in the first trial.
The retrial went on for 2 weeks. I was unsure of what would happen.
Once you finish closing and the jury is excused to go back and deliberate, For me, there is a certain feeling of helplessness. Fortunately, in this case, we didn't have to wait that long. It was less than a day. I think it was maybe a matter of 4 or 5 hours.
On October 23rd, 2015, the jury returned a verdict of guilty in the Kevin Almar case to the charge of first-degree murder.
For murder in the first degree, there is only one sentence that a judge can impose, and that is life in the Department of Corrections. Justice was ultimately served in this case. It just was far too long in coming.